करने वाला है. Welcome to Petroleum Club of Pakistan Technical Webinar Series. Today the topic is Fundamentals of Coal Bed Methane. It is basically a series of 4 sessions in which we will cover the fundamentals of coal bed methane. The second session will be coal characterization and suitability for CBM. The third one will be the case history of first CBM to LNG project in Australia. And in last session, we will invite all our local experts to have a panel discussion to see the CBM potential for Pakistan. The guest speaker is well-known petrophysicist, Mr. Haq Minhas. So I will request Haq Minhas to please, first of all, give us your short introduction and then start the session. Haq Minhas.
All right, thank you, Tahir. In fact, thank you for giving me the title of petrophysicist. In fact, I was to start with a petrophysicist, but then I converted to reservoir engineer. So I'm probably known as a reservoir engineer, but we have to basically everything. So this is basically introduction to coal bed methane. And let's see, in fact, it is a short session. This is my very brief introduction. I have worked for Schlumberger, ENI, Petronas, Baker Hughes, and now I'm basically working with the Eternal Energy as Director of Reservoir Technologies. I have worked on many different things, and I really look forward to share some of these learnings with you on this forum based on EOR, field development planning, technologies, and all these. This is really my passion to do some teaching, and in fact, last about 6 years I've been focusing on unconventional shale oil, shale gas, and hydraulic fracturing and geomechanics. These are the areas that are really we need to expand behind our conventional oil and gas, and I hope we will one day. So the objective of today's discussion is basically, since it's an introduction to coal bed methane, so we'll talk very briefly about the little bit of history of coal bed methane, what it is, how that this differs from conventional gas system, and there are many things: geological setting, its burial history. All these things basically really define and help us understanding the coal bed methane. Every coal is not suitable. The depth of the coal, its quality, everything is important. So the good thing is it's shallow, it's easy, it's cheap, and more importantly, it has been producing from many countries and for many years, since 1990s, even before. In fact, it started producing from 70s, became commercial, and it was CBM has a history of something like more than 50 years. Okay. Initially, it was done. In fact, we know we have in coal mines, we have explosions because gas which is present in the coal bed methane explodes, and initially it was done to remove that gas. But later on, they realized that why not use this gas, and slowly it started emerging as a technology. And you'll be surprised to know that today probably 8% of US gas that they are producing is coming from coal bed methane, which is something like from 5 to 6 BCF per day. So it can be a huge resource. And we'll discuss about one project that I've been working on in Australia, where CBM is converted into LNG, and Australia is exporting that LNG. Just from one field, in fact, we were producing about 1 BCF per day, and resulting into some 7 million ton per year of LNG. It's one of the first projects that converts from CBM to LNG. So it's a very mature technology, very mature technology, much more mature than shale gas that we know a lot now. In fact, and the objective is that with knowing that we have so much of coal here, do we have any coal bed methane as well? Is this coal suitable for coal bed methane? That is really our ultimate objective, and I hope we will, by the end of this series, we will be able to answer this important question. All right. I'll do some very kind of basics here, and I'm sure many people like Dr. Zwan and all, who already have a lot of background about this, could be a bit intimidating for them. Sorry for that. Coal bed methane, it's not really methane only. It could be 98% methane. So some people, they object, they name methane. So it is actually coal bed gas which is in coal. It could be a little bit of ethane. It could be CO2 as well. So it doesn't have to be only methane, although in most of the cases 98% is methane. Okay, in some other countries it has given different names. For example, in Australia they call it coal seam gas. In other places they call it coal seam methane. In some cases they call it coal mine methane, and so on. So, but basically it is the gas which is present in coals. And let's try to understand, where does this gas come from? Okay. Now, in the bigger picture, in fact, well, I have to. Okay, in the bigger picture, this gas is. I seem to be a little bit stuck over here. No. All right. Okay. In the bigger picture, where is this gas located? Can you see my cursor, Tahir? Tahir Saab, can you see my cursor? हेलो
नहीं, आप कर्सर आप कर्सर यूज करें ना, हमें नजर आता तो नहीं है इस वक्त.
Okay. No, I'm trying to use, but probably you can't see. That's okay. So I want to make sure that when I move cursor, you see or not. You don't see. That's okay. All right. No. So just I'll try to explain from this picture. So what this thing is, in fact, this little picture shows conventional gas, which is on the left side, trapped in a trap up there. Then down there in the sink line, you see this tight sand gas, and there could be also some in the dark here, which is in the source rock, that is shale gas. All right, and then up there on the right side, you could have again another trap. Yeah.
अब नासर सारी आप जो हमें जो पिक्चर नजर आ रही है मेरे स्क्रीन पे, तो वो वर्ल्ड मैप है. आप जरा दूसरी पिक्चर, आप दूसरी पिक्चर एक्सप्लेन कर रहे हैं.
Does it flip to? Okay, let me see. This is the.
Go back to first slide. Go back.
I am okay. All right. So I am on the first slide now.
Now आगे जाए.
This is okay. Now second slide.
है. Yes. बिल्कुल ठीक. Third is okay. Fourth is okay. Now ये ठीक है. अब बात करें जो आप बात कर रहे थे अभी, इसकी बात कर रहे थे.
All right. Okay. So okay. That's thank you, Dr. Sir. Okay. So now in this slide, I'm showing where are different type of gases present in a system, in a petroleum system. So on the left side, you can see this gas which is trapped there, conventional gas. Then in the bottom sink line, you can see, in fact, in the yellow part, tight gas, tight sand, which is again a kind of basin sand, basin gas. And then below in the black, in the kerosene or in the source rock, you have this shale gas. And then up on the right side also, again, you have another trap, possibly with oil and gas. In the top of the slide, you have at very shallow depth a sink line type of thing, a moon type of thing. That's a coal bed. And inside this coal bed, that is where coal bed methane is. And typically these beds are up to about 1500 meters, about 4000 feet. Okay, so we will explain later on why this depth is restricted. It cannot be shallower than a couple of hundred feet or 300-400 feet, and it cannot be deeper than 4000 feet. Okay, because at very shallow depth, we will explain later on, the gas will escape, and at a deeper depth, as we go deep, the permeability becomes so low that it is not really commercial. So the depth for these coal beds, ideal depth for coal bed methane is from a couple of hundred meters up to about 1500 meters. Okay, ideally in the range of from 500 to 1000 meters is the best depth. All right. So
1000 meters or 1000 feet?
No, 1000 meters. 1000 meters.
1000 meters. Okay.
1000 meters. About 400. Well, 4000 to 1500 meters. Okay. So the beds which are deeper than that, they are basically very low permeability. All right. So, and now, in fact, in the pyramid of resource triangle, it falls basically together with the shale gas and tight gas. And in this pyramid, we all know what this pyramid is. That as you go at the top of the pyramid, it is high permeability, high quality reservoir, but its resource is limited. As we go deeper and lower towards the bottom of this pyramid, the resource expands. We have tremendous amount of resource available, but it is more difficult to produce. So the cost becomes high and the technology needs much more difficult. Although in case of CBM, the technology is not that complex. These are basically very simple vertical wells. Okay, not like shale gas where you need the horizontal well multi-stage fracturing. So CBM, it basically needs a very low technology, but technology part doesn't really apply, but this gas becomes expensive because each well can produce typically about 0.2 to 0.5 million cubic feet per day. They are shallow wells, so you need many wells to produce this gas. But they are shallow wells, very cheap wells. 1,000-meter well is really doesn't cost much, but the rate per well is very small. Okay, so that's where this CBM lies in the resource triangle. It is difficult to produce, is more expensive to produce, but resource is huge. In the world, CBM is spread in many different countries, but the key countries which are producing CBM is US, which is where probably 8 to 9% of gas that is being produced comes from CBM. Then is Australia, China, Indonesia. These are the countries which are basically producing gas. China is an emerging country, has been producing the CBM for some time. India is producing now. India is producing roughly about let's say 40 to 50 million cubic feet per day of gas. So India has been producing for quite some time. And since India is our neighboring country, I really pulled out one paper yesterday, and I probably will spend one session about the CBM basins and the plays in India as well, because they are, I mean, we can kind of relate with India quite easily. If they are producing for many years, why can't we do that? All right. So this is the resource in different countries: Australia, America, Middle East, Europe, Africa, and the whole world. This is the in-place volume. And Rogner was a estimate that was done something like 10-15 years ago. That's quite famous in 2007, 2008. He estimated that technical recoverable resource in the whole world of CBM is about 9,000 TCF. Quite huge. But what really matters is the resource, or the technical recoverable resource. That the previous slide you saw in place volumes, but in technical recoverable resource in different countries is this what you see here. Total is about 900. Here it's about 900. So there are different estimates. Right? So really the place where it has been producing and it is well established is perhaps United States and Australia and Canada, of course. Canada was probably pioneer, right? Even before the United States. CBM in Canada is very popular. This is the production history of different gases in US. That this slide was made in 2012. I could not really find an update to this slide, but what it shows is that CBM that you see in the bottom little black shade, that is CBM. It has been constantly producing about 8 to 9% from 2000 onward, okay, which is about 4 to 5 BCF per day in US. It's a kind of fixed resource that is coming continuously over time. Of course, more shale gas is overtaking that whole thing, and tight gas is also growing. Conventional gas is shrinking. On the other hand, all right. So CBM should not be basically kind of looked at as something a very small level. It can be a big resource. When I used to discuss CBM, many people basically asked questions, and I kind of listed those questions over here. Number one is that where does the CBM, this gas, come from? The gas in coal beds can be of three different types. It could be thermogenic gas, which is basically is generated in situ from the coal as a result of pyrolysis and coal maturation. It could be also, in many cases, could be migrated gas. In some cases, it is migrated conventional gas that goes up and gets trapped in the coal beds. All right, the source could be just a conventional gas, but can be trapped in coal beds, and then we can produce it as a coal bed methane. It could also be biogenic gas, or it can be mixed gas. Quite often, it is a mixed gas. Okay, it could be biogenic together with the thermogenic. Biogenic means that the coal has not yet matured, but because of bacterial action, it generates enough gas, like we do this thing in biogas, and that gas also gets trapped in that coal and can be produced. We'll discuss examples from US. In fact, I will in next sessions I'll discuss two extreme end members of coal seam gas in US. One is San Juan basin, which is the best quality coal in the world, very mature, lot of gas content. The other end member is Powder River Basin, which is very low gas, immature coals, lignite to subbituminous type coal, which is more or less resemble with our coal. So, I mean, two end members are the extremes of the spectrum, will give us kind of idea that what is the best in the world can be and what is the worst in the world can be, and they are both producing. All right, now how this gas is stored in the coal? This gas is not really stored like a conventional reservoir. It is adsorbed on the surface of the coal. If you take up the coal and open it up into different layers, it has so many layers. If you take 1 centimeter of coal and open it up, that surface can basically fill a football stadium. It is as big surface as it is, and on all that surface, it can absorb. The molecules of gas can stick on that surface, so it is in the adsorbed state. Okay, so this is the fundamental way of gas present in the coal. In addition to that, some of the gas can become free over time because of reduction in pressure, and that can go into micropores and be there like a conventional gas as a free gas. Or sometimes a very small quantities of gas can also be present in the solution gas in water. There's a lot of water in coals, as we will see later, and so but the majority of the gas is there adsorbed gas, not absorbed but adsorbed from D on the coal matrix itself. We will discuss, in fact, how much this can be. Now, how much gas resource, as we discussed before, in 2000, 9% of US gas production was from CBM. US produced 9.6 TCF of CBM gas from 89 to 2000. That's probably as big as our probably Sui gas is, Sui field is. And the biggest producing field in the US is San Juan, and we will discuss its case history in coming sessions. I have personally worked in Australian coal bed methanes, so I will discuss in detail that Australian coal bed methane, but also I will discuss this San Juan basin because there is so much literature available, and it is producing something like 2.75 BCF per day. It's a big play. Of course, on the downside, we need too many wells. So, for example, in US, there were something like 20,000 wells that were producing this much gas, an average of 0.25 million cubic feet per day per well. So, per well, the production is small, but they are cheap wells, as we said before. Little bit about the coal classification. When coal gets buried on the right side, you can see, in fact, trees or plants, they get buried, and initially it is peat, then it is over pressure and temperature, exposure, it turns into brown coal or lignite, and then it goes to subbituminous coal, and once everything is carbon is finished, it goes to anthracite, and eventually we are lucky, we can find some diamonds there. So on the left side, the same thing is translated into the coal rank. As the coal gets buried and it matures and matures and matures, its rank keeps on increasing from low rank of lignite coal that some of it we have in Thar, and then it goes to subbituminous, bituminous, then goes to semi-anthracite, anthracite, and that coal is semi-anthracite, becomes used gas for us. That is one aspect of the coal maturation. The second aspect is that how much in the coal, I mean, we don't have the pure carbon, it is also some stuff like sand, clay, all that thing is present in that. So that certain percentage of non-coaly stuff is present there, which is, we call it ash, which is basically like sand and clay and all that. So what is the content of that? That defines the grade of that coal. It can be clean coal, or it could be shaly coal. It could be carbonaceous shale. In fact, I would also like to explain one more thing here, that when the same basically organic matter, when the organic matter is more than 50%, we call it coal. When the organic matter is less than 50%, it turns into a shale gas. So in a way, in a spectrum of kerogen, or this organic matter, it is a transition from coal into shale gas, carbonaceous shale, and then a shale gas. All right. So again, that's one thing. Another aspect is, which is not really very important over here, because most of the coals are woody. What is the raw material that made that coal itself? What's the type of that coal? Okay, but we are mostly concerned with the rank of the coal and the quality of the coal, how much ash content it has, and how mature that coal is. Well, in fact, you can stop me for any questions, please. I cannot see any raised hands or anything. Probably it will be more like a verbal actions.
Okay. Haq Minhas, can you go back to the previous slide? Thank you. So, you mentioned about going from lignite to anthracite. So, within US, where do you think these gases, which rank of coal this gas is coming from?
Very good question, sir. In fact, in I think I have one slide. I don't remember if I put it in this presentation or not, which shows, in fact, the variation of coal in San Juan Basin. In San Juan Basin, the coal can vary from subbituminous to low volatile bituminous in different places. Okay, so but on the other hand, the coal in Powder River Basin is mostly lignite to subbituminous type. So they are both producing, except that in San Juan it is more like biogenic gas. Whereas in Powder River is more like a lignite gas, and San Juan is about 90% is thermogenic gas, but there are also in that coal also there is some biogenic gas, and I'll explain how biogenic gas managed to enter into a mature coal. So there is a coal that's mature. Initially it was a puzzle, mature coal, but you also have about 10% of biogenic gas.
Sure.
Okay. So there is a good question, and we hopefully will answer this question when we look at coal types and the basin types in US.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So the coal itself is coal mining. Coal can be extracted through mines if it is very shallow. This is a coal bed that we see over here. At a shallow depth, it is exposed, and it's very shallow, and we can mine that coal. And the same coal bed, when it goes deeper, there are two things. Because it is so deep, we cannot mine that. At the same time, it is deep. The gas is present there in that coal. Of course, in a shallow depth, what will happen is that because of lack of pressure, lack of hydrostatic pressure, any gas which is there, we will explain it in it later in a couple of slides. Any gas that was there, that would have leaked. So you wouldn't see much gas in the coal mines. Although there are sometimes gases, that is what causes the explosions, and but not too much. All right, so there's not much gas present there. So, and it's easy to mine. So we mine that coal. But when it goes deeper, we cannot mine it. Number one, but at the same time, we have enough gas present in the coal, so it makes perfect sense to go there and drill a well and produce only the gas from there. Now, the good thing is that it is a very cheap way of producing gas. We keep the coal in situ, we don't disturb the coal, we don't bring all the dirt and all the pollution to the surface, we just produce the clean gas like any other gas. Okay, so it is probably the cleanest way of getting energy from coal. Okay, a little bit difference between how the gas is stored inside the coal bed methane on the right side and how the gas is stored in the conventional reservoir. Okay, so in the conventional reservoir, of course, the gas is stored in the porosity that you see in yellow dots, in the porous in the porous pores, little pores that are there in the between the grains. Whereas in the coal bed methane, the gas is sticking on the coal surface, as you see here on this slide. It's called adsorbed gas. Okay, at the same time, you see here in the coal, you see a horizontal fractures and a vertical little bit fractures, which are very, very important for the production of CBM. What we call these fractures are, we call them cleats. And why these cleats are created? Coal by nature is very brittle. If we turn the coal, you can take any coal and you see it is very brittle. You turn it, twist it, and it will crack. Okay, so the coal, when it is exposed to stresses, fractures are created, and the dominant stress regime will create these yellow parallel fractures. We call them face cleats. Fractures are also called cleats. In fact, there are long continuous fractures. We call them cleats, and they are typically about couple of centimeters apart. And so there are very dense fractures in pores. And we can see them only through microscope. So there are two types of fractures. One is continuous fractures. We call them face cleats. And the other one, red, they are perpendicular to those. They are called butt cleats. Okay, they are kind of not continuous fractures, but they are there, and they are very important for the production of gas. So as you can see, these little red, how the gas flows actually from the matrix, somehow it goes into the fracture. We'll see later on how it goes into the fractures. It goes into the fractures, red fractures or yellow fractures, gets accumulated into those yellow fractures, and yellow fracture provides us a path from where the gas can be produced through a well. All right, so the gas goes from matrix to these cleats, and from cleats or the fractures to the well. And the fractures are fortunately there in all these coal beds. And it is these fractures that give the permeability to coal bed methane. And as we know, reservoir engineers, the more permeability we have, the better will be production. So we need permeability, and for permeability, to have permeability, we need fractures. And those fractures by nature are there. But on the downside, when the same coal is, because this permeability comes from fractures, as the coal is buried deep and deep, what happens is that those fractures get closed. That's why as we go deep, the permeability becomes less. Okay, so when we go below about 1500 meters, the permeability becomes so low that we can't really produce that gas. So that gives, in fact, an upper limit of the depth, which for producible CBM. This is a core that shows the same cleats or the fractures as we see in that picture. Okay, so these are the face cleats in yellow, in green, sorry, and the butt cleats. They may not be perfectly perpendicular, but roughly they are. And as we said, they are created by stresses. Okay, so the dominant stress regime will create these green fractures, which are face cleats, and the minor stresses will create the other fractures. How much gas can we store, or how the gas is stored in coal bed methane? This is very important. We can take a tank, for example, in the left side, a red tank, a simple empty tank, and we can push a lot of gas into that tank. We can also fill that tank with many pebbles or sand, and in between the pores we can still push a lot of gas. Or we can have that gas in a coal bed, in a coal system where the gas is now adsorbed on the coal matrix. All right, and that is, in fact, sorry, I forgot to put one figure. This red one is probably, if you like, about 5 BCF per certain area of volume of the tank. In conventional reservoir, it can be about 3 BCF. For 2 BCF. In coal bed, it can be about 3 to 4 BCF. So a coal bed can actually have even more gas stored compared to a conventional reservoir. Okay, so coal had the quality of absorbing a lot of gas. Although, how much gas a coal can absorb is shown by this slide. Are you still on slide number 17? Is everybody okay? Dashab?
Yes, sir.
17.
Okay, all right. This slide 17. So what these two curves are showing is that in a conventional reservoir, which is shown by.
नासा आपने मुझे कुछ कहा था
जी नहीं मैं आपसे पूछ रहा था कि आप कह रहे थे ना जो स्लाइड्स हम कुछ सिंक्रोनाइज नहीं है मैं पूछ रहा हूँ
अभी ठीक है it's okay
so this conventional reservoir is shown in straight line. So what it means is that as we are increasing pressure on the bottom line, as higher and higher pressure, we can compress more and more gas per unit volume of the reservoir. Very simple. As we are increasing pressure, we can compress and add more and more gas into the reservoir, conventional reservoir. All right, so linear relationship. On the other hand, CBM is little different story. Since on CBM, we increase pressure and we can actually push more gas that is absorbed to the coal matrix. And as we keep on increasing pressure, more and more gas can go into CBM. As you can see, in fact, at low pressures up to about 2000 psi, CBM has the capacity to take more gas compared to conventional reservoir at low pressures. Once you reach around 2000 psi, then the conventional reservoir will take over and they can actually store more gas because the gas is being compressed. In CBM, we don't compress gas. What happens in CBM, the coal matrix keeps on taking gas. At one time, the surface of the coal matrix is all filled with the molecules of gas and it cannot take any more gas. All right, so at low pressure, CBM can actually have more gas per unit volume of the reservoir compared to conventional reservoir. All right, so CBM can have a lot of gas, or the coals can have actually a lot of gas stored inside it. Now, Irving Lemieux was a U.S. Chemist on surface chemistry. He got a Nobel Prize in 1932, and his subject of study was how the gases can be adsorbed on the matrix of any material. And that basically that this slide is borrowed from him and is used as a basic slide for all CBM work. And this is one slide. If we really understand this slide, we understand everything about CBM. What this slide is showing is that if you take coal matrix, there are two different curves. The lower curve is for Powder River Basin and the upper curve is for fruit land coals of San Juan Basin. Okay, let's look at the upper curve, which is the fruit coal isotherm. We call it isotherm because all this experiment is done at one temperature. What it is showing is, and you will have to focus a little bit. I'm sure people who know about coal seam gas or coal bed methane don't have to worry, but people who are new to this thing, it's really important to understand that. If we take that small volume of coal and start compressing gas into that volume, start from the left lower corner. I wish I could show you my cursor, but let me try to basically explain this thing. If we start from the origin of the curve from the leftmost corner, and we keep on increasing the pressure, we will be able to push more and more gas into that coal, which will be, of course, adsorbed gas. And if we, okay, can you see that curve still? Dr.
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
Sir. Yes.
All right. Oh, by mistake, I clicked the slide and it went to the next slide. Okay, so as we are pushing more and as we are increasing pressure more and more, we can add more and more gas into that coal. Okay, so and this curve up there, upper curve, this is shown as Lemieux isotherm. We call it Lemieux isotherm, which basically tells us that at different pressure how much gas can be stored into that coal. And the gas is basically on the vertical axis you have this SCF per ton of coal. How many SCF per ton of coal you can have in San Juan Basin, for example, we have about 300 SCF per ton. In the Powder River Basin, there is less than about 100 SCF per ton. I would expect that in Thar coal, probably we have very small, similar to this lower curve, which is about 100 SCF per ton. Any number, Dr. Rizwan Saab, that you have about gas content in our Thar coal?
No, sir. Actually, I don't think any kind of these option studies have been carried out for Thar coal. But to the best of my knowledge, what I have learned about Thar, that we do have beds at varying lengths. We start from like 150 meters to 300 meters. So these are the general. There are 3 coal beds which are in this range of depth.
From 100 meters to 300 meters.
Yeah, almost 150 meters to 300 meters.
All right, okay. But if you look at the basin-wise, the depth could be quite variable. I don't expect such a small window of depth.
Yeah, I mean, these are the samples which have been, collected in past. So there may be different number.
Okay. Even if we have any seismic survey done in that area, that will tell us about the coal beds.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So now, in fact, what we are saying is that if you look at upper curve, as we are increasing the pressure, we can add more and more gas into that coal. This is what we do in the lab, and we do this. We call it adsorption study. We can push more and more gas into the coal. Now let's take the reverse. When we take that coal from for example, from San Juan Basin, it could be at if you look at this curve at 2000 psi at very high pressure, we can take that coal sample, and now we can look at the content of that coal, that how much gas is there per ton of that coal. That's now, in fact, a different story. We are not doing a lab study. We are taking an actual core sample, and we take it in a canister. We call it a canister, which is basically an enclosed coring system, and we preserve the gas and take it into the lab, crush that coal, and see how much gas content it had. All right, and we may find that it had gas content that falls on this curve, or in the real San Juan, what they found was that the gas was actually, they were expecting gas to be at a pressure of 1620 psi, which was the initial reservoir pressure. They were expecting gas content to be about 450 SCF per ton, but actually they found that the gas content was much less. Gas content was only about 227 SCF per ton, right? What it means is that the rest of the gas had escaped. Now, why it escaped? For that, they had to look at the burial history of San Juan. And what they found was that during the burial history of San Juan, the coals were buried, they were saturated with gas, but later on there was an uplifting. And during that uplifting, the pressure in the reservoir reduced. When the pressure reduced, what happened is that the coal could not keep all that gas inside, and a lot of gas escaped from that coal. Now again it was buried, it was more deposition went up there, but already the coal had unfortunately lost a lot of its gas. You may not understand this slide now, but I will definitely revisit this slide later on in my next sessions, and we'll try to explain it in more detail. But what it means is that the initial gas that is present in the coal may not be at this Lemur isotherm. It could be, in fact, the amount of gas could be much less. Could be, Tahir Saab, you have to give me a way of using cursor. I wish you can do that.
मुश्किल लगता है मेरे ख्याल में.
Without cursor, I'm a little bit handicapped, but anyway, I'll try my best. Okay, so basically that means is that initially, if you take that coal and we try to drill a well, it will not be able to produce because there's no free gas. All the gas that was there is absorbed in the coal. So what we do in that case is that we take that, we go into that well. Can you see this slide with a little cartoon of well? Okay. So now what we do is we go into that well, we put a pump down hole there, and we try to start pumping that water. We start pumping water out from the coal and start reducing its pressure. Once the pressure reduced, now let me go back to previous slide. When we reduce its pressure, what happens is that once the pressure reaches to this, what we call it, critical desorption pressure, we start getting free gas. Because now we have some excess gas that can leave that coal matrix and start collecting into those cleats or the fractures. Now we have free gas in the coal that we can produce. So what we do is initially, and most of the cases, our reservoirs are at subcritical pressure, where we don't have any free gas in the coal bed, and we have to actually keep water for some time till we start producing some gas. Okay. Now let me go back to the next slide again, the same slide again.
हक मिन्हास साहब, एक क्वेश्चन अनीब साहब ने हाथ खड़ा किया, मेरे भी क्वेश्चन था कि हमारे पास अगर चले पाकिस्तान की बात करें, अगर आपके पास इतना एक्विफर अटैच है तो हाउ लॉन्ग वी विल बी प्रोड्यूसिंग दिस वाटर? चाहिए तो years लग जाएंगे हमें.
Very good question, Dr. Shah. So there comes the hydrology. Hydrology is so important. In some cases, coal beds can be connected with aquifer, with the active aquifer, with the rainwater. Then it becomes very difficult because we can keep on dewatering for a long time and the water can be recharged. But in most of the cases, because this coals are in the swampy area, usually they are overlain and underlain by shales and isolated coal beds. In that case, dewatering is not such a big issue. And I'll explain in the next other slide also. Sometime we may not need any dewatering at all, quite often. So hydrology, understanding of hydrology, burial history is really fundamental for any coal bed evaluation.
Just one question on your previous slide, please. ये जो फ्रूटलैंड कोल आइसोथर्म, ये कहाँ का कोल है?
This is San Juan. This is San Juan Basin in the US.
Right. और सेंट जॉन्स, ये जो करेक्ट, ये जो आपने एक बिहेवियर दिखाया है, ये was this consistent in the various wells that were?
Oh, not at all, sir. Not at all. In fact, I will try to show you one slide, not here, not in this presentation, but in next presentation. Isotherms coming from different wells. They are quite different, but more or less they lie on the same trend.
Or plus, I think St. John's maybe. I mean, I think you go from one. I mean, first of all, there'll be variation from well to well, and then there'll be variations from, of course, coal to coal.
Absolutely. So this is a very good point. So what we do is, in fact, quite often I have in Australian coal, I have basically hundreds of well, which all the isotherms, they are actually plotted together, and you can generalize this thing, and there is absolutely variation, but variation as you see over here. From one basin, for example, upper curve, which is San Juan, and the lower curve, which is Powder River, they are quite different from each other. Whereas San Juan, if I take all the San Juan cores and isotherms together, they will be more or less on the same trend. There will be cluster of lines, but more or less similar.
और जो ये Fort Union वाला, I mean Fort Union. This is how far this is from St. John's?
Which one?
Fort Union.
Fort Union. No. This is quite different. This is Powder River Basin is quite different. Let me see if I have a map here. I think I had a map here. Can you see this map?
Yes.
Okay, so down there, this green is San Juan, and Powder River is towards the north.
Something like in the Midwest, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's just above Texas. That is San Juan.
Okay.
Whereas Podu River is up in the north, probably close to Canadian border.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, in fact, Podu River is quite a different. They actually the reason I put these two slides, these two examples is that Podu River is one of the worst or the poorest quality reservoir in US, whereas San Juan
Okay.
is the best quality reservoir, CBM in terms of CBM.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I thought if I show you these two end members, that will give you an idea how good it can be and how worse it can be, but still produce.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll do this introduction, and we depending on your questions and everything, we can drill deep and we can go to as much details as you want later on. Now, in fact, this is the typical production history of a well, if you like, on the left side, on the gas rate and the water rate. Initially, we start pumping water, and that is the dashed curve that you see here. We start pumping water, and the water, as the coals are dewatered, the water rate, of course, will become less and less. And as the water comes out, the pressure will go down, and the gas rate, which is the black curve, will keep on increasing. So we have like an anti-decline. So the gas rate keeps on increasing, and once the coal is fully dewatered, then we get a long stable production that could vary from years to many years, and that history could be very long actually. So the good thing about this coal beds is that the gas may coming for many years. So typically it could be about 20-30 years, and then later on a decline period starts when the coal is basically depleting of the gas that it has. Okay, so well can keep on producing for many years. Eventually, you can reach the abandonment pressure when we cannot really produce any more gas, or the well becomes uneconomical. Okay, this slide I put here is that this is to show why I put here is that to show the significance of the deposition of coal itself. The coal can be of different types. It can be bright coal, which is basically with less ash content. It has more, like majority of it is just a coal or a carbon. It could be a dull, which is more like a sandy material and less coaly material, or it can be again a bright. And you see, in fact, we know that the coal is brittle. So if it is pure coal, it will have more fractures. If it is a dull coal, which is more ash content, it will have less fractures. At the same time, if underneath you have thin coal beds will tend to fracture more. So they will have more fractures. And more fractures mean more permeability, and more permeability means better production. Okay, so we need thin coals. Thin coals are good in the sense that they will be more permeable. On the other hand, thin coals are, of course, will have less gas. So we have to really put all these things into equation. And those things can be, let me show you one thing here. Okay. The key parameters that control the gas production are, we will again go deep into these. Thermal maturity, how mature the coal is, number one. Mackerel composition, that each unit of coal, we call it mackerel. What is its content? How much is coal? How much is ash, etc. How much is the gas content in per unit of coal? How thick the coal seam is. It can be from few feet to tens of feet. How many fractures there are. How are the in situ stresses? Because if the stress is too high, the fractures will tend to close. And the permeability, that is linked to essentially to fractures. And the burial history, that's very important. Sometimes the coal can be, initially they can be full of gas, but later on they probably, due to uplifting, they can go up and all the gas could be lost. Okay, and the hydrology, as earlier mentioned by Dr. Saab, that's very important. That when we dewatering that thing, hopefully we are not really connected. Those coal streams are not connected to some rainwater where it is being recharged continuously through some water. So hydrology is very important. Isolated coal seams are the best. Okay, now let's.
हाँ साहब just एक simple clarification please. जो in situ stresses हैं, जो fracture create हो रहे हैं पहले और वो in situ stresses की वजह ये regional stresses की वजह जो fracture आपने पहले बताए थे, in situ stresses will help you more fracturing or after depletion this in situ stress will like to close the fractures.
That's a good question. Initially, it is the stresses. What they will do is they will try to buckle that coal, and that buckling effect will create fractures.
Yes.
So initially, you need that regional stresses. They're always kind of disproportional or anisotropic stresses that will create those fractures. But later on, once those fractures are there, they are created, and in all the coals, fractures are there. Now the pressure is there in within that fractures that is tending to basically keep those fractures open. But if you put too much stress, then those fractures will close.
Where you will put this stress? Stress is already there.
This is with depth. If you look at this slide, if you look at this slide, this will basically explain everything. Exactly your question. That as we go deep, what happens is that stress will keep on increasing. We know that overburden stress increases as 1 psi per foot as we go deep. Okay, and also the horizontal stresses, they will also in relation, they will keep on increasing. So as we go deep and deep, the stress will keep on increasing, and because of that stress, initially coal will have fractures. They are also created by stresses, but now in fact that compressive stress that tends to close that fracture as we go deep. So as we go deep, because fractures tend to close, and with depth the permeability becomes less and less. In the coal, the only permeability is through fractures. So if you look at here, for example, at 1,000 feet depth, the permeability is about 10 or 20 or 25 millirc. If we go down to something like 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet, permeability is reduced to something like 0.1 millirc.
Yes.
This is the effective permeability, including those fractures. So that's why, in fact, when you go very deep, the permeability of the coal is so low that it doesn't really produce anything commercial.
Okay.
They have tried to do in very deep coals. They have tried to do some hydraulic fraction. This is probably where you will do. You may think of drilling some horizontal multi-stage frac wells, but they really haven't done in many cases. They become too expensive. All right. Okay. So these are all very good questions, sir. All right. So I will stop here with this little bit of introduction today. Okay, and depending on your questions and everything, we will drill deeper into more. We'll expand more into later sessions, and I'll go back to this slide. This slide is itself can be used. For example, if you look at this upper curve, and hopefully Mr. Tahir Sahab will allow me to use cursor somehow. That really is something that I need so badly. If we look at this slide, this upper curve. And if we know that initial condition of the reservoir is over here, and we know the ultimate condition or the abandonment condition is what's the pressure of that, we know how much gas can be there, how much gas is stored in this curve. So from this simple curve, we can calculate in place volume of the gas. We can calculate the recovery of that reservoir. So this one simple curve really becomes our working diagram. For everything.
So what is the recovery? Usual recovery kya hai?
Recovery can be, in fact, from the initial gas, we basically leave very little gas down there. Can be up to 90%.
90%, very good.
90%, that's right. So in place volume, whatever we have, we can recover typically about 90% of gas.
Okay.
It's by the time we reach it. Of course, it varies in some cases. If the water can, I mean, as you said earlier, if we are dewatering and water comes in again, then we are in a bit of trouble. Then the well will be watered out. But quite often, in fact, the wells after some time will start producing dry gas. We initially install pumps, but once if I can use this slide, Initially, we install pumps, but once this well has been dewatered, we can even remove that pump and keep producing this gas.
Because once I heard that in Australia there was a field, maybe you know better than me, they were producing water for 2 years until to reach to the, they start then desorbing gas after 2 years of water production. I don't know which field is, but this was the, somebody told me about this.
Absolutely. Doctor, this is a very good question. This is a very, very basic question. Again, I'll go back to my master slide that looking at this curve, if you look at upper curve and we take a simple coal sample from somewhere, from a well, we take a coal sample and we look at its gas content, and if we know where is the gas, how much gas it has, this coal has, and based on this linear isotherm, how much gas it should have. You see?
Yes.
Based on lab study, based on that curve, what we see is that how much gas it should have, and then how much gas it has. Already, I can estimate that how much dewatering will I need before I start getting free gas.
Suppose if you take the example of 1200 psi pressure.
Yeah.
Just because we don't know, we cannot see your cursor. At 1200 psi pressure, how much gas will be storage? So you can have about 400, nearly 400
absolutely
SCF per ton. SCF per ton.
That's how much gas we should have. But in actual, what I see is that the gas is not 400 SCF. Actually, that gas was only about 227 SCF. Our actual gas was much less. So actual gas was 355 SCF per ton. Okay.
Yes.
And now, in fact, I know that I have to reach this point before I will start getting any free gas. So that basically means that I have to reduce my pressure from 1200 to something like 800 psi before I will start, before the well will start producing gas. So it is not really, it will not